All right, good morning. Good morning, Sansei, here, Yama, and
Yeah, Kamiyama and Taban.
Good morning.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, fine?
Yeah, fine.
Good. All right, so we'll start with the lecture, all right? And as I did you see the outline that I sent to Professor Kamiyama?
Sorry, not yet.
Did you see the outline? Did you see the outline? Development in Asia. Can you hear me well?
Yes, quite clearly. Thank you.
All right. So this will be a 2-day lecture, all right? And this is the schedule that I have sent you, right? Today we're going to start to discuss about the definitions of concepts and issues. As in the title says, rural development in Asia. So I'm going to start with a discussion about the meaning of rural, the meaning of development, and the meaning, and also talk about the Asian region. So from the title, I will be talking about each of the concepts: rural, development, and the Asian region. Okay? And so that is what we'll be discussing today: rural, development, and of course, the Asian region. And then today we'll also be talking about putting the two words together, rural and development. So we'll be talking about putting together two words, the development in the rural areas. So we'll talk about that particular concept also. Right, can you hear me well? Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I am okay.
All right, can you see my slides?
Yes, I can see on the screen.
Can you hear me so well? Okay, so you can stop and interrupt me, right, if you have any questions.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Right, the first module I define as the definition of concepts and issues. Why is it unmute? Why is it again unmute? That's okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's okay.
Right. It's always goes and unmute. Okay, the first slide is what we call definitions of concepts and issues. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll start again with what is rural. I cannot hear you, so I only hear myself. So now what is rural? What are the issues and consideration? Okay, what do you think is the meaning of rural area? Right, commonly we say it's a countryside. Rural area is in the countryside. It's an area that is located geographically outside of the towns and cities. So when we say rural, anything that is not urban is rural. Is that clear? Anything that is not urban is rural. Whatever is not urban is considered rural. And so the typical rural areas have, according to demography, has these two characteristics: very low population density and small settlement. What do we mean by the word low population density? It means to say that there are only very few people in 1 square kilometer, right? Very few people. Unlike in a city, it's so crowded. In the rural areas, it's not crowded. And we call that, the term when it is not crowded, we call it low population densities. Okay? So let's look at the next slide.
Focus on the population.
Right. This is typically what a rural area. So what comes into your mind when you see this picture?
Okay.
What do you come? What? What, what is the description that you see in the picture?
Don't know, it's so like the one on the back of the bull. Was in the rural area mostly cattle rearing also is done there. People because livelihood, the adults' livelihood depend on the animals. Others also use farming as their livelihood in the rural area.
Very good, that is correct. So in the rural areas, most of the time,
No,
it is
yeah, I can
considered
control.
a farming community. So when we call it a farming community, people actually produce their own food. They produce, it's unmute again. They produce their own food, and then aside from the two definitions that I have given you, it's low population density and small settlement, and usually the occupation of the people is actually farming, no? As you could see in the picture, right? In your country, what do you call rural? Sometimes we call them villages, right? Villages, or a small community. I do not know why.
The same also we call them village because the countryside mostly people are grouped on the village. You stay in the village, called village also.
Rural areas have agricultural character, right? And aside from farming, they also engage in logging, mining, petroleum, and natural gas exploration. So that is a rural area. It's not just farming. They can also go into mining, that's the other economy. They can also do petroleum and natural gas exploration. And lately, tourists wanted to go to the rural areas too. Is that true in your country? Is that true in your country too?
Yeah, because
Sometimes for city people, it's exciting to go to the rural area.
yeah, people from the city mostly like in my country, if during the peaceful days, people because the others who are born in the town, they like to take their children to the countryside where their parents originated because they want to show their culture to the family where you came from. And during the dry season, like in my village, people do fishing, using the traditional one because in the dry season the rivers itself got like it is dividing, so the women do fishing and men also go for hunting in the rural area. And most of the building also people are doing during the dry season, like in the village people, because still in Africa we rely on the grass thatch, we use the grass thatch in the rural area where women collect grass and men collect the poles for the building, and sometimes they laying on the brick. During the dry season, most of the activity are done, and sometimes the other family member who are staying in the urban area, they can who are working, they can get what they call leave and come to the village and do some also the construction, because sometimes the parents are staying in the rural area where they have to visit some and other relatives.
They find the climate in the rural areas less polluted. Is that true? The air is fresher.
Come again?
The air is fresher in the rural areas. Is that true too?
Yeah, I think because in the rural area, like the
climate is okay because
people have a lot of trees, and it is not polluted like in the urban area where you have a lot of noisy generators, vehicles and all. But in the rural area, when you go to you breathe a fresh air because the oxygen coming from the trees and what, it is a bit fresher than what is in the urban area.
Exactly. So that is the reason why tourists are attracted to go to the rural area. So that is also an opportunity in the rural areas, that's also an opportunity for the rural areas to let tourists come in, and that can be a source of income, right? Exactly. Right, let's move on to the next slide. Now, there are issues in defining what is rural. In this particular slide, as you could see, all right, there is some inconsistency in defining what is rural. For example, in the United States, the Bureau of Census there define rural by its population size. If the size is small, the population size is small, that's considered rural. And if it is low in density, that's also considered rural. So how do they define rural? Low population density and sparsely populated. But the issue there is that 40% that is defined rural in census, in the Bureau of Census in the United States, actually live in metropolitan areas. So there is that issue. That's one particular issue. So if you stick with the definition that a rural is low population and low density, there are areas in metropolitan areas that are not necessarily rural. Okay, so let's look at the next office, the Office of Budget and Management. No? How do they define rural? They define rural as metropolitan and non-metropolitan. Or as we said before, anything that is outside the town and cities is considered rural. So the criteria is different from the census. The criteria of the budget and management is whether the place is outside the town and city. But what is again the issue there? The issue there is that 14% of those that are in the metropolitan, as defined by the Office of Budget and Management, live in rural according to the census. So there is a conflict. Can you see the conflict there?
Yes.
Right. So the definition of rural differs depending upon the criteria you are using. I do not know how it is in Africa. So do you just think about anything that is not city or a town is considered rural? Or do you stick with this definition? Small population and less crowded or low population density. Whatever your definition you're using, there is still can be some metropolitan areas that are still considered low in population and not so crowded. And yet, they are metropolitan according to the budget and management, and therefore they are not rural. But for the census, they are rural because they have these characteristics. Do you have, can you respond to that? Do you understand that issue?
Yeah, I understand because like in Africa, people consider rural areas mostly outside the town because they consider rural people as the farming community. Mostly they believe that the farming community, their livelihood will mostly depend on farming. So they consider them outside and the population is a bit sparsely located because they either, if a bit maybe it will be concentrated in a small and then another one distant. So the settlement pattern is a bit sparsely, or not like in the urban area where it is organized. But if it is here, then another homestead you get somewhere, another small, just like that, because people grew according to the clans in the rural area. Sometimes there are small clans sit here, then the other one also sit somewhere there.
That even if the area is small and there are just little population, to other definition, and it is small and it is not crowded, but still metropolitan. But in the Bureau of Census, once it is small, it doesn't matter whether it's metropolitan or non-metropolitan, it is considered rural. So that is the inconsistency. That's the reason why I'm trying to define first what is rural so that we can have both understanding, no, on what is considered rural, right? So we have two definitions, But these two definitions have certain issues. In the census, they said that as long as the population is low and sparsely populated, then that must be rural. According to the budget and management, as long as it is outside the town and cities, that is considered rural. But there, in the last column, these are the issues that I have defined. All right, is that clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. Right, now we go to the next slide. Why is it so important for us to understand what is rural? You know, you just say anything that is outside the town and city, anything that you see, carabaos or bull, is considered rural. But that is not necessarily important. What is important is that we have to define what is rural in an area, because it has an implication to rural policy making and regulation and budget allocation. So in other words, if you are defined rural in your country, then what policies are needed for you to do in order to improve or develop that rural areas? And how much do you need? If you have very small population, usually the central government will not give you enough budget. So that is the importance of defining what is rural, right? So if you have rural, if you say rural, the policies in rural are different from the town and cities. The budget or the money that should be given in the rural area should be different from those that are given in the urban areas. That is the meaning why we have to define what is rural. But in my second line, as you could see, can you read it?
Yes.
Can you read the second line?
Yeah, I can read. What is rural differ from one country to another?
Okay.
Agree with that.
Do you agree?
What is rural in Sudan may be not rural in the Philippines or in the United States. The definition I have given to you was the rural definition in the even within the United States, they have two definitions, the one by census and the one by the Office of Budget and Management. But what I am saying in the second line is that rural differs from one country to another. It differs. It's not the same, no?
Yeah,
For example, in my country, in the Philippines, right, rural is not always. We combine the criteria of both, all right? When we say rural, we say it's remote. Transportation is very hard. It's so hard to reach that area, and we call that rural.
Oh.
Transportation, going to that place is only once a day, and we so consider that rural. So that is the meaning of rural in my country. What about yours?
Okay.
In your country?
In my country, mostly like the rural, they don't have what we call organized transport system. Mostly people rely on either the bicycle or of recently the motorcycle, because they use as a mean where it is now it has become as a common mean. We call it the border. People use the motorcycle, but things like a bus or the taxi and all that there in the rural area. Mostly only from urban center to urban center people are using. And you need to use your bike and motorcycle. If you have money, you pay and go. Or others, they use there because they food. Because when we are young, we do food around 7 miles to a town to get some of the necessity. Like if you want to buy soap, salt, you need to travel sometime 7 miles at least to get there from the nearest urban center from the rural area.
Very good. So you cannot see automobiles, you cannot see subways, you cannot see railway station in the rural areas. You can only see that in the metropolitan or urban and cities. Sorry, I've added one characteristics of rural areas. The transportation in the urban areas is different from the transportation that you see in the rural areas. There are also no internet connection in some, because there are no electricity in the rural areas, as different from that of the city. In the city, you have tall buildings, right? Offices. There is none in the rural areas. So it differs from one country to another. In our own definition right now, we have agreed on a consensus that it is not just more population, it is not just outside of the city, but we say that the transportation is different, the means of communication is different. People use bike and motorcycle in the rural areas, whereas in the city we use cars, railways, subways, and so forth. Very good definition. In other words, if you could see the third line now, the economic activities are different in the rural and in the urban. In the rural areas, as we had mentioned, it's usually farming, mining, fishing. You know, it's usually mining, farming, and fishing, and we consider that rural. The geographic dimension sometimes is big and wide, but sparsely populated. When I say sparsely populated, it means to say that there are not many people in 1 square kilometer. Your next neighbor may be 1 mile away. Is that true? All right?
Yeah.
Unlike in the city, you know, your neighbor is just, you share the same wall, right? The same apartment, the same row houses. But unlike in the rural areas, you have to travel 1 mile or several miles before you see your neighbor. So in other words, economic activities is different and geographic dimension is also different. In the next line, in this slide, you could see that agriculture is still highly relevant in the rural areas. So in other words, one clear defining factor in any country, I mean all countries, whether in Japan, United States, Sudan, or the Philippines, rural areas is usually an agricultural community. All right, it's an agricultural community. So if we will going to summarize all the characteristics of what is rural, what is common to all countries is that rural communities are agricultural communities. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's correct, because in the rural area, most of the activities, they rely on agriculture. That is the backbone of the rural sector. So because what they get, they feed on it. They don't have another job. Maybe there are few who might have jobs like the teachers or the health workers if they are a small health center, and they supplement with farming. So agriculture is the backbone in the rural area and is the major livelihood which is supporting the rural sector. Maybe in case if in some country where if they discover some mineral, then the mineral will supplement some of the things, but still agriculture is considered as a major.
So very good. So now we do agree that agriculture is still relevant to the rural areas and therefore an important determining factor in defining what is a rural areas. So we have agreed on that. Okay, next let's move on to the next question. I have prepared here some questions for discussion. You may have your own question, but these are my questions to you for that particular lesson. Right. My question to you is, why is it important to develop the rural sector? Or why the rural areas are important? Why the rural areas are important? Okay? You may answer any of those questions.
Rural areas are important because they provide the urban area with the agricultural product, like you will call maybe in case of Africa, most of the what foods are produced in the rural area. The cereals and what are transported to the urban center because the urban area are the one providing the markets, and the traders do travel from the urban center to the rural area and buy those things and come and sell to the urban community, because there in the urban center they don't have enough land for farming. They only maybe if they do small vegetable growing within a compound where they have some space, you would call that is urban farming, but this doesn't support them. Most of the foods come from the rural area, and even the animals, all these things are coming from the rural area. The forest products, which are important in the paper industry, also coming from the rural area. And it is also important to develop rural sector, because if rural areas are not developed, more people will be migrating away from the rural area and move to the urban center, and as a result, there will be, like in the urban center, there will be a shortage of housing, and back there they will leave the older people where production cannot be enough. As a result, it can result into farming, because as the older people are left behind there, they are unable to, because as the ones grow older, the rate of how you work it is reduced and you cannot produce enough. So government or donors need to develop rural sector so as to attract the able-bodied to move to the rural sectors, so that they do farming and other activities, be able to support the urban community. Because like if you do have a good hospital in the rural area, schools, such kind of thing can attract many people, because like those who will be at the certain age, retired, they can go back and settle in the rural area, because they know they have some of the amenity which they have been using in the urban center. As a result, they can attract many people to move to the rural sector and be able to produce some of the things that can support the urban centers.
Right, very good. What I'm trying to tell you here is the fact that rural areas are important because they produce the food. And that's what you've been telling me. You're correct. Urban centers are also important because they manufacture the food and they market it. That's your word, they market it. But they cannot have market and they cannot manufacture food if there are no supplies of food. And the supplies are coming from the rural areas. So if there are no more rural areas and no more food will be produced, what will the country do? They will be importing food from other countries, and that will be very bad. So that people in any country should develop their rural areas so that they will be self-sufficient, meaning to say they will have enough food to feed not only the rural people but also all over the country, including the urban areas. And I think you're very good at that. You were able to grasp that. They are important because they supply food, all right? And they are important not only because they provide the natural resources other than food, not only food, but mining, fish, and so forth, and minerals. Is that clear? Okay. You have your own questions.
The question mark is in a situation, because the challenging, like in Africa, our major challenge is insecurity in the rural area, because rebellions mostly they don't start in urban area, but they start in the rural area where there are some hiding place. So it is like a big challenge for rural community to overcome such situation. In such situation, what should the rural community do in such situation? Because the rural area are used as a hideout for the bandits who do sometimes bad things the what to well, first they start terrorizing the rural community, after which also they will expand to the urban area. Now, so in such situation, what should we like as a donor do to avoid such situation? Because such kind of things they happen as a result of maybe either negligence or lack of what. Because people do take sometimes harm as a result of underdevelopment, or they say marginalization. Because sometimes in a rural area they do have some of the mineral or things are being produced from there, but the community itself they are being marginalized. In such situation, what advice can you give to avoid such a situation?
All right. One of the reasons why there's suffering from food insecurity is mainly the growing population. You know, there's so many populations, so what they do is they transform some of the rural areas where we produce food into urban settlement. That's one cause, right? There's so many population already in the urban areas, so they spill over. Spill over means to say they move to the rural areas. And so what happened is that the rural areas, that what used to be farms, are now converted into urban settlement. And that is a result of food insecurity. That's one. The other one is overuse of the land. You know, sometimes we tend to put a lot of inorganic materials, chemicals in our soil, that sometimes we usually have 2 seasons of planting because of the chemicals in the soil. Sometimes we have low yield. We cannot produce as much as it was before. Why do we use chemicals? Because we intend to produce a lot of food to feed a growing population, no? But in our effort to feed a growing population, what happened here is that we tend to exploit so much the soil. And in the end, at first we produce a lot of food. But later on, the inorganic chemicals, spraying and fertilizer that we put on the soil will actually make the soil very acidic. And therefore, later on, you will find out that it doesn't produce as much crops as it was before. At the beginning, it does. But later on, it is not sustainable, which we're going to discuss later on. Okay. So there are 2 things that I have answered to your, I have 2 answers to your questions. The reason for food insecurity is that a lot of the rural lands are being transformed into urban settlement because the people in the urban areas need more space because they are growing bigger than the rural areas. The second one, again, because of population, we need to feed more people. So to need more people, we are in a hurry to make the land very fertile. So what is our choice? We use inorganic fertilizers, we spray insects, we do all of these things. At the beginning, we have high yield, but 5 or 7 years after, the soil is totally very acidic and it will not produce enough crop as it was before. That is the result of food insecurity. The other one is water. Again, plants need water, all right? But because of the low supply, because of our misuse of water, we do not conserve it so well. That can result also to insecurity. So those questions are very important. The lectures and the slides will only tell us what it is, but the discussions that we have on the questions enriches the different points that I have given on the lecture. And at the same time, you are able to ask, and I can, when you ask questions, I am given the opportunity to elaborate it further, so that it will be more applicable to your own experiences in your own country and in other countries in the world. You see, you should not only discuss what's happening in your country. You are now in Japan, and that is also important because then you'll understand the global world. We live now in a global world, and therefore, it is good to understand what's going on in your country, but it's also good to understand what is going on all over the world. There are very few rural areas in other countries, which I'm going to show to you later on. Okay?
Yeah.
Do you have any other question?
So the conflict between the farmer and the cattle keeper.
If not, then we can move to the next lesson.
Like they are in a situation like we call a conflict between the farmers and the cattle keeper, or we call the pastoralists. Because this is also another major challenge in the developing country. The pastoralists do keep a number of animals which is more than human being. Like one can keep, one has more over 1,000 head of a cattle. And you know, animal, the cattle also they do we call soil degradation. And as the animal feed and it causes some soil erosion, with the time, as because animal alone people cannot rely on, but animal and the farming community need to be side by side because people use the meat as part of protein, but the cereals and other things need to be produced. So how can we solve such situation, or suggestion that you can give for us?
All right. There's a conflict all the time between the landlord and the tenant. Is that true to in many areas in the developing countries? The landlord owns the land and the animals, as you said. The tenant do not own anything. So what happens?
Property right is not so clear.
The landlord gets more of the produce, while the
But
tenant
our case is so clear, but
right?
in your case, not so
So
clear.
one solution that the government has been doing, not only in the Philippines, but in many developing countries, is agrarian reform. Have you heard about that? Okay, I will type it. Agrarian reform. Okay, what is agrarian reform? It is actually distributing land and pastoral animals to the tenants so that they begin to own their own land, right? So in other words, one of the solution is what they call agrarian reform, wherein you distribute land and pastoral animals to the tenants. So that what happened here is that the landlord will not be only owning the land, but also the tenants have the chance and the opportunity to have their own land. And what is the idea of having your own land? You have more incentive, you have more motivation, you are more motivated to make it, to produce more. Unlike before, when you are a tenant, you will say, anyway, everything will go to my landlord. But if I own the land, they do not, they will have more incentive and motivation to produce more food. But there is still a problem with agrarian reform. They need capital. The tenants need capital for seedlings, right? What else do they need? They need capital for seedling, for water irrigation, and so forth, right? They don't have this. So what happened is that we lend them to they lend to the bank. They go to the bank to get the money before they go to the landlord, right? So bank versus landlord. This is the old system, or before agrarian reform. But what happened is that they do not pay the bank. Unlike the landlord, even if they do not pay them, they give services. In the bank, you need to pay back, and you need to give your land as collateral. And so what happened is that since they cannot pay the bank, the land is going to be back, will be remitted, will be, they will take away the land from them. So it's not just reforming it. I think you need to have a culture change. In the old system, you don't need to pay back the landlord. How do you pay back? By giving services. What are services? If there are important events, you cook for the landlord. You do all these things, and then that will pay back already all your debts. But you cannot do that in the agrarian reform. Debts should be paid in cash, not in services. So that is the problem. Do you have the same problem?
Okay.
In my country, we don't have major problem of land because the land is a communal owned mostly in the rural area. The land is a communal owned. People, the ancestors, because the ancestors were able to divide, like this one was for this, and your grandfather were digging this side. The challenge is not within the world. The challenge is the pastoralist community who are not from the other villages. They do come because in the pastoral community are from other tribes. They do drive their animal during certain season to the farming community where they do destroy the crops. That is the problem because the community alone itself there, they might have a problem of land, but it's not a big deal because the land, everybody has known the boundary from his ancestral there. And there are some land which are not tackled yet. There people maybe can say, the community can sit down now, we need to go and move to the other side and start digging because the other one we have already used for a long period of time. We can still leave it to do the following and move to another area, start digging the other side, then they can divide among the family because they know the family and divide, people start the challenge is only from the other pastoral community who are not from there because in the other community, farming community, there are few people who do farming and they have animal, but they keep the animal, control the animal, they don't drive it to the farmland. If the animal go to a farmland, there is the rules, community set a rule. If your animal enter and destroy crop, we need to pay, compensate the owner of the farmland. But the other community who are from other tribes, when they drop the animal, the other community try to say, because due to now the current situation, there's a lot of guns on the hand, so they can sometimes easily get gun and the point that they, so such kind of thing has created a lot of mistrust among the other farming community and the pastoralists. So as a result, it has also like contributed to the conflict in my country. One factor that has a major also contributed to the fighting in the country. That's what I was trying to say.
Country, it's even much. There's violence too, right?
Yeah.
They have guns and everything. And so what do? It's not ownership of land that's the problem. It's sometimes more of persecution of the past of these people. Wow, you have even a bigger problem. So what they do is they keep on moving and moving and moving away from these people who are terrorizing them. Is that a correct word? Terrorizing them, using guns.
Yeah, it's correct because they do terrorize the village. Sometimes when now the other community, the farming community, because the farming community, their defense tools are maybe they use arrow and bow. These are the major things they can use. So in case there is a fighting now, the other community, the pastoralists have gun in their hand. They can sometimes start touching or burning or the village. So as a result, sometimes it force the other community to go. They terrorize the other community have to move away. So that's the major thing. Sometimes it is also the weakness of the government because a government policy which is not favorable has sometimes contributed into what the such situation.
Oh, the police are from the government, right? What do they do? Do they make peace? Do they try to settle the conflict? How do they settle the conflict?
It is a bit hard situation because sometimes the pastoralists are the animals owned by maybe top military officer. So it is very hard for the police to tackle. So as a result, people are taking sometimes law into their hand. So have to start maybe either killing the animal and the people start killing themselves because you go to the government is supposed to see the government supposed to be neutral. If there is a conflict, they're supposed to settle. But as the top official are the one owning now, you whom to go, you cannot go. So people are taking the law into their hands. And those are the challenges sometimes facing the community in the rural area in some of the developing countries.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. Okay. We'll go back to that later on for more of these issues. But let's move on to the next. We talk about development. All right. When I talk about development, I am a sociologist. I think Professor Kameyama has told you what I am a sociologist. So we study development too. In fact, we have a term called sociology of development. For development sociology, it is the study of the causes and consequences of economic change in society. So the study of development has been one of the fundamental aspects of sociology since the beginning of the discipline. Because in sociology, we look at social change. But not all social change is development. Not all social change is development. Because development means always positive change. Change can have been negative. It is not always positive. But development is always positive. So the subject of development is very important in sociology because when you talk about development, there is change, right? Back into your issues that you have doing right now, you wanted to change that system. You want to change the system of, the military owning the animals themselves. But how can these people own the animals when the military doesn't only own animals, they also own their guns. They own guns. That means to say you cannot, when you're faced with guns, I think it's more of what you wanted to do is survival, right? Rather than anything else. So when I talk about development, it carries sometimes a value judgment. When we say value, it means to say what is important. So in my country, I said it is important for people or for the farmers to own their land. But in your country, it's important for them to avoid the conflict from the military so that development will occur. How can that be? There should be massive change to that, no? One of the things about development is not social change. It's not also the second one. So it's not just change. It is not also not industrialization, as the third line says. Because in industrialization, you need to have the following, capital, education, you have education, and slow population growth. So that when you talk about industrialization, what you need are all of these. But it can also lead to development. Industrialization can also lead to development, but not always. But not always. The third one is, we'll talk about that too. And maybe you can jot down some of your questions while I am still, or you have your questions in your mind so that you can ask them to me. I am not here to answer all your questions, but perhaps when you exchange ideas, we can both know what can be a better way of looking at it. So in development, it's not also economic growth, no? There are some countries with economic growth that is very, very high, but it doesn't trickle down to the poor people, no? Nigeria, for example, a neighboring country, has a very high economic growth, but there's still very, very poor, many populations that are considered poor. So that is not considered development. That is an example why it should not be equated to economic growth. You can have economic growth, high GDP, growth domestic product, or growth GNP, no? But development may not occur because it doesn't trickle down to the poorest of the poor in the population. Okay, so development as value judgment, it is not just change, it is not necessarily industrialization, and it is not always economic growth. Okay, those are the four things that I have given you. Do you know Karl Marx? Karl Marx is a German philosopher turned sociologist, right? He has a lot to say about development. He actually is a German philosopher who migrated to England, and that is where he got his idea about Communist Manifesto. That is where he wrote his book called Communist Manifesto. He has a theory of development, and let us listen to what he says. The country that is more developed industrially only shows to the less developed the image of its own future. Meaning to say that's future, but doesn't always mean that that is a developed one. According to him, urban and industrial life are very different in social and political terms. So even if you are urban and you are having an industrial life, they're still different in social and political terms. As you could see in your own country, it's more of political. The rural areas is being politicized through the military, and therefore it affects the social thing. The third line Marx says is that capitalism was regarded as one of the states in a transition. In fact, he doesn't like this. He said that this is making the poor more poorer and the richer richer. And that is his criticism about capitalism. So who has a capitalist government? United States is one, and many of the Western Europe. They need to have a capital in order to grow, right? And that is economic growth. So what happened is that, according to Marx, because the poor are getting poorer because they don't have capital, and the rich people are getting richer because they have the capital. So what happened is underdevelopment as a result of the capitalism system. He divided countries into two, right? He divided the countries into three. These are the core countries like the United States and the Western Europe. The and Japan is a core country. The G7, the G20, these are the core countries. The semi-periphery are perhaps Malaysia, Indonesia, South Africa, they are semi-periphery. The periphery are like us, Sudan, the Philippines, and those are so there are three types of classification based on capital, right? So as you could see in the arrow, right, the resources are coming from the periphery. They get our resources and they bring it to the poor country. The resources are coming from the periphery and to the semi-periphery. They are coming from the blue one and from the pink one, which is the semi-periphery. So what do the poor people do? These resources are manufactured and they transform them into goods and they sell it back to us. They sell it back to the semi-periphery and they sell it back to the periphery like us. But the resources came from us. They don't have resources. And yet they manufacture it because they have the capital. Because in manufacturing, you need capital. We don't have the capital to change our resources into goods. So what do? They change the good for us and then sell it back to us. And so what happened? We become dependent upon them because they have the capital. Right? So that is what is happening. That is the meaning of dependency. We give them the resources, they change it into goods, then we buy the goods back to them. And that is make us dependent of them, and that makes us even poorer. And you call that the dependency. This is according to Marx. And that's why the poor are becoming poorer and the rich, they are becoming richer. The rich one here are the light pink, the poor, right? And then these are the ones that are large because this is the source of the resources like bananas, wheat, and so forth and so on. Okay. Right. So what he was saying is very strong about that. Underdevelopment occurs because of the capitalist system. The core industrialized countries were experiencing growth and economic development. And the word that he used is this: exploitation of the non-industrialized peripheral countries. So we are being exploited because of our resources. Okay. This is Wallerstein, another sociologist. Just like dependency theory, he introduced what he called the world system theory in 1974. So what are the developed countries in this particular drawing? And I'll make it into a slideshow. Right, as you could see here, right, these are the what? These are the developed countries, the blue one, right? These are the peripheral countries, including the Philippines. This is your country in Africa, red, also a peripheral country. These are the semi-peripheral. You could see where you are now is Japan, right? This is Japan. It's blue. It's a core country. Ours is red. It's a peripheral country. And that is how the world system theory tells. It's the same as Marx is saying. The country economically is divided into three. The red one, the periphery. The blue one, the core countries, because they have economic growth and they have the capital. And the semi-periphery are this one, okay? Parts of Latin America and South America, South Africa, as you could see in this particular one, all right? And there's a few in Indonesia, all right? And this is Australia. It's still a core country. Okay. Right. So now you understand the meaning of development. Okay. According to world history and social change, there is a world economic system in which some countries benefited while others are exploited. The word exploited is there again. So the core countries are the ones benefiting from our resources by exploiting our resources. Very hard word. That is one theory. Since you are in Japan, I included this particular slide. Can you read the slide?
Okay.
Yeah. Like in the first one, a strong cooperation between government and the business.
Is successful. Is that because they just do not have the capital? They also work very well with their government, according to literature. They are also able to have acquired maritime prowess, which is perhaps Professor Kamiyama can talk a little bit more about this. And the development started even in the Meiji Restoration, which is they strengthened their transport and banking system. The other reason why they are core is that because they have the capital, there is also a high literate population, and their development is technology, not just industry, but technology. So do you agree with that? What do you think?
I've agreed because since I came here, I've seen the cooperation between the business and the government. They working hand in hand. Because not like in Africa where you get everybody or open small business. But here, every system is organized. Like in the agriculture sector, the Japan Agricultural Corporation do the one. The coalition of all the farmers are members, and the foodstuffs are sold through the convenience stores, not on the like open market where maybe some few individuals can benefit. Because when it is not, the market is not under control, people like few who can afford, they can exploit the poor farmers. They just buy at the cheap and now sell at the expensive price to them at the urban center. But here, everything is like a system. You move from one area, the prices are just uniform. It is not, even if there's different, but it's maybe in share not much. So everything is the system is controlled all over. The banking system, you can go to any convenience store, you can withdraw money. Not like here, you don't line up in the bar where you go and line in the whole world where you need to line. But here you go to any convenience store, just you have a card, you insert and then you withdraw your money. You don't move with money, only move with your card. You can get money anywhere.
If you have your bank,
bank
account.
Your bank account. So,
bank balance.
In terms of literacy, they are highly educated, and the technology is well organized. The transport and the transport system is well, because in the rural area, even they have what called the local train system, and now in the urban major city, they have what we call the Shinkansen, the speed train. So they are more ahead than some of the Western world, because after the bullet train was started in Germany, then Japan followed by Japan. So Japanese technology has now move ahead, and maybe Chinese follow by Chinese now, because Chinese of lately also they started out. But like in America, America still doesn't have the bullet train. They have the other train which are still, they are under development, but Japanese systems are well organized.
There you are. So that is my answer to your food insecurity. The food insecurity in Sudan can be answered by a strong cooperation between the government and business. So we can actually use the Japanese as a model. Maybe not this one. Maybe we don't have the technology yet. And improve the transport and the banking system. That's what you can do in Sudan. But the most important thing that can be done is this: strong cooperation between government and business, which we do not do. Just as you said, you can withdraw money anywhere else. Business people, cooperate with the government, and therefore there is more access to money anywhere else. In other countries, I don't know how it is. As you said, the government controls so much, and therefore it is not very good to open a business, right? It's not friendly, it's not business friendly, because the government wanted to control the business. So he doesn't encourage private business. He wanted to be the one to do the business. He's a government, he's in politics, but he also wanted to be in the business. That is, but in countries that are developed, not only in Japan, but also in India and in other countries, it's separate. The government just do the governing, and the business are doing the business. It's a different sector. But I think, as I can see from what you are saying, is that the government in your country is also wanted to be part of the business. So there is no separate sector. It should be a separate sector. So there won't be any exploitation. Okay? All right. So that's one that I have shared to you. All right. Now, I'd like to go into this one. I did mention about globalization and development and the consequences of it. Right, when we talk about being global, I'd like to give it to you is free flow of food, free flow of communication, and free flow of people. Meaning to say people can go and move anywhere else. And free flow of products, no? So that's the meaning of globalization. So globalization also means advancement in technology, communication, and transportation. So if you have that, what will be the result or the consequences? There will be competitiveness, there will be price and quality would also be competitive, meaning to say, is my education that I got in my country the same as the education that I'll be getting in Japan? If it is the same, then you are globally competitive. But if you were educated in Sudan and you will just be an operator in Japan, you are an engineer in Sudan, but when you go to Japan, you are just a machine operator, then the education is not the same. It's not competitive. So in other words, it should be the same. The same thing also with the people. Education is the same. It's very important in globalization. So that when you got the scholarship there, it's because you have that education. That is why other people in Sudan were not selected, because they don't have this. They don't have education. So education was the only reason that went well with you, and you took advantage of its globalization, and you were able to study internationally. And this is the meaning of, here is the meaning that I gave you a while ago. When we talk about globalization, it means to say free flow of goods, free flow of people, free flow of information and services. And that's what we are doing right now. The information is coming from the Philippines. The Japanese government is outsourcing me. The word is outsourcing. That's the word. It's outsourcing me, you know. It's the Japanese government is outsourcing the knowledge from another country. All right. And that is what globalization is. So right now we are conferencing. We don't have to be face to face. I don't have to come there. But because of technology and internet and teleconferencing, we are able to do it. And therefore, this is an example. What we are doing now is an example of outsourcing. So what will be the result? Less inequality, more equality, and we will not, supposedly more equality and less dependency. But sometimes, because we cannot be competitive, it can also increase inequality and increase the dependency. But this is what's happening right now. Because of globalization, because of technology, knowledge can also be outsourced, just like what we are doing right now. So in other words, what we are doing now is a product of globalization. Globalization. There are 3 nationalities right now in this meeting. 1 Filipino, 1 Sudanese, and 1 Japanese. And we are meeting together. And the result, and that is because of globalization. And hopefully, whatever I have, whatever you learn from Japan, and whatever I'm going to share to you as a Filipino, will lead to development. Not only development to Sudan, but also development in my country. But you're also helping Japan develop, because then they'll get a different perspective on how it is like to live in another country. And that is the meaning of globalization. Okay. Before we move to the Asian region, I have one question for you. What may be the causes of underdevelopment?
The major cause of underdevelopment, like the developing countries, is the corruption. Corruption is the major cause because, like where I came from, the population, according to the last census, when we were under Sudan, South Sudan was around 8.2 to 10 million population, and we have enough natural resources. We are number 3 in the world in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of oil. We have around 3.1 billion barrel reserve of the oil in the underground, which is one of the number 3 in sub-Saharan Africa. And we have gold, we have the natural gold, we have the river, we have the wildlife where tourists can come. If the resources are shared equally, I hope everybody, we could be even like some Western country, where everybody might have electricity in the rural area, communication will be, the road will be tarmac, and nobody will be going to bed hungry. Because there, if government can invest in the agriculture sector, like buy some tractors, open big farms, produce. Because we are relying on traditional tools. People use the hoe for farming. There are few who can use the ox plow, maybe who have petrol, they can use ox plow for production. So if corruption is reduced, because we know corruption cannot be eradicated completely, but it can be reduced to a certain minimum where at least everybody need to benefit from the dividends of the government, because the resources of the country is supposed to be shared equitably, not few the elite to side, but everybody need to get. Because if the money is invested in terms of education, if many people acquire education, good education, skills where they can do, others can create their own jobs, can still contribute to the development. And the health sector, the health sector, because if the population is healthy, then they are able to produce what they can be able to. But if the health system is poor, it means everything, when the sick person cannot produce for himself. So corruption is one of the major things, and as a result of the corruption, it has caused insecurity. Because as there is corruption, the other people feel like they are neglected, it now causes insecurity. So as a result of insecurity, the little even which people, individuals struggle to put down, like if somebody is able to put this house where people are able to destroy, even sometimes the money being given by the donors for building the schools, health center, had been destroyed during the last 4 years when during the conflict. So the insecurity and corruption are the major cause of underdevelopment in the developing world countries.
Right. So that is correct. Am I getting your answer correctly? This is your answer. So what you have is that one is corruption, that's number one. And the second one is people feel insecure. That's the second of your answer. Because due to conflict, a lot of infrastructures and the like education, schools perhaps, are being destroyed, all because of conflict, no? So the second one is perhaps people feel insecure due to conflict, right? Maybe it's more of internal conflict. It's not actually external, internal conflict. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So those are the two reasons for the insecurity. One is this, and the second one, number two, is this. Did I get it right? Am I ever?
Yeah, you are right. Those are the two reasons I gave for the underdevelopment in the developing most of the sub-Saharan African country. Because they have the resources are there, but corruption, because of the top corruption by the officials in the government, they want the country like can sell, if they can't produce oil, if it is sold to the international market, the money, it goes to few individuals, not everybody, because the resources of a country is supposed to benefit everybody, but as a result of corruption, few are the one getting the one. And as a result of also internal conflict, it can result into the destruction of, because sometimes in the developing sub-Saharan Africa, most of the health center or schools are being constructed as a result of the donation from the ODA or other donors' funds, because they have known Africa has been not developed, because even if though they have resources, but they're still underdeveloped.
Excellent answer. So only very few individuals. What you are saying is that you are number 3 oil-producing country in the sub-Saharan Africa. Where do the money go? You are saying that only few individuals benefit from it. Still, a lot of people are using traditional tools for farming. They should be having modern farm tools so that they produce more food. But because of corruption, they get all the money and it won't benefit the many, including the farmers in the agricultural sector. Thank you. See, I am learning a lot from you, So this lecture is a two-way thing, It's not just a one-way thing, it's a two-way thing. We cannot solve the problem of the world, and we cannot solve the problem of Sudan. But at least one of the things that we are doing here is that we are aware of the reasons for the problem. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Now, so we are able to discuss what is rural, What is development? Now I will give you an understanding of the Asian region. Okay? The Asian region. This is the third one. This is the Asian region. Right, this is the map. As you could, part of Russia, part of Mongolia, Japan is part of Asia. Right, and so forth and so on. But this is not part. So you see, this is the part that is Asian. Okay, let me talk about Asia. Right now, Africa is not the most populous continent in the world. Asia is the most populous continent in the world. Of the 8 billion, almost 8 billion people, 7.5 billion people in the world, 4.54 billion inhabitants are living in Asia. That accounts to 60% of the world population. The world's two most populated countries are in Asia, and these are China and Japan. Together, China and Japan constitute about 37% of the world population. 37%, and that is a lot. That is 37% of the world population are living in Asia. Okay. Now I'll show you one so that you could react. I'm now going to open the link of this particular one. Now, that is Asia. How many of people in Asia are rural, right? This map tells you that in 1960, 0.6% are rural.
Sorry. The link page is not yet open up or shared with us. So could you check if you okay. If you want to share this link on this room, Zoom, you need to change the screen.
I need to change this.
Yeah. Sorry. Please wait. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
Do you see it now?
Yes, I can see. We can see. Thank you.
Sorry. So as you could see, the world population is, in 1960, is 0.567. That's the rural population. No? It went very high. The world is 1.788. That's the world population, 1.7%. This is the world population, not just Asia. I'm sorry, this is not just Asia, but the world population. In 1961, about 0.567 are living in the rural population. In 1969, it's about 1.786% are rural. Okay, 1.81 in 1971, 1976, 1.34, 1980, go down, right? If you move into the 2017, only 0.177% are rural population. So what can we say in this particular graph? The rural population in the world has gone down, right? It went from 1.81% in 1971. Now today it's just 0.177. So the rural population in the world is decreasing, no? As you could see from this graph. Okay, I'll have another one. So now I'm going to show you the map of Asia population in the map of Asia by population in rural areas. This one means to say it's below average on the content, and this one is above average in content. That's Pakistan. Okay. So this is Asia. This is the list of countries by population in rural areas. Okay, this is Yemen. 68% is rural. Let's go to the blue one first, okay? The Pakistan, 64%. India, 70%. Okay? Myanmar, 66%. Cambodia, 80% is still rural. Laos, 67%. Okay, the Philippines, only 1%. In Japan, there's still a lot of rural areas in Japan, 33, as you could see, right? And Indonesia, this is all. China is still 53% rural. Kazakhstan is 41%. So in other words, these are above average on the continent in the world. So this one is Yemen, but this one is below average on the continent, right? So this is what you could see. Now these are the list of population in the country. Can you see it? Can you see me? Okay. So among the population in Asia, Sri Lanka has the highest rural population. Sri Lanka. Nepal is followed by Cambodia, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Timor-Leste, Bangladesh, Vietnam, 70%. Okay, as you could see, the Asia continent is 57. Half of it is rural, half is urban in the whole Asian continent. The China is 53%, the Philippines is 51%. Of course, Japan is 33%. This is Japan. All right. Okay, and as we go down the line, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore, no rural population. That's why they are called city-states. That's why they are called city-states. So studying rural community, studying rural development in these three countries is not relevant because they don't have rural areas in Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, neither in Kuwait and Qatar and Israel. Where is rural communities relevant? It is relevant in all these countries. Sri Lanka, Nepal, Cambodia, Afghanistan. Even in Japan right now where you are in, it's 33% rural. So in other words, about 77% is urban already in Japan. I am introducing to you Asia because you are in Asia and your lecturer is in Asia. Maybe you can share about Africa later on afterwards. But this is the rural communities in Asia. Do you find this interesting? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So these are in this slide. I think I have. Do you see this? No.
Disappear, faint.
Do you see this?
Disappearing. Faint. Not clear.
Is it? You can see it?
Yeah, I can see, but it's faint.
It's not clear. Yeah, I know. It's not really clear. Okay, so that is Asia. That is Asia. Okay, so do you have some questions for discussions? Now, your turn. Do you see this? Do you see this?
Yes,
I see.
All right, these are some of my questions to you. What are the similarities of Asian region and African region? And what do you think are the differences? Tell us how many of these citizens live in the rural areas. Your turn.
The similarity is most likely because in Southeast Asia, majority of the population live in the rural area. The same to Sub-Saharan Africa, because Sub-Saharan Africa, most population live in the rural area, but urban area of recently also started coming up because of the improvement in maybe people as services in the urban centers are getting better. Sometimes the rural community like to send most of their children to urban center because they know the service there in urban is better than what is in the rural area. But still, rural population is the highest because living in urban center is expensive. Everything require money. But in the rural area, as you produce something you don't need, because you can collect even firewood from the forest. But in the urban center, either you buy charcoal or you use stove or you use gas or electricity, so which is not affordable for the average population who are a bit poor if they don't have work. The difference might be in terms of in Asia region, the rural, which is called a rural, might be a town in sub-Saharan Africa, because every rural area has all the service like in the town area. But in sub-Saharan Africa, I don't see, because if something is rural, it is completely rural, most of the things are not there. Sometimes in a man even you can also hear a sound of a car, because there they are not. But in like Japan, maybe a place which is called rural, it might be a town, because everything, the service it is there. And in terms of the rural population in my country, the exactly population I don't know, but there are many. Most of the people live in the countryside. That's what I can tell.
In my country, 50% are in rural and 50% are urban. In Japan, 33% are rural, 70% are urban areas. Yeah, one of the things that I got from you is that living in rural areas is expensive. That's why people cannot afford to go to the rural areas, to the urban areas. In rural areas, you can cook your food using fossil fuels like charcoals and wood. You don't have to buy gas. But you have plenty of oil in your country, but still, that is very hard for you, right? Because, again, of corruption. So these are some of the questions that are. But one of the things I can mention about is that although Asia is the most populous continent in the world, African continent is now the fastest growing population in the continent. In other words, in 2050 or in 2050, most of the 10 populous country in the world, about 60% of the most populous country in the world are coming from Africa. Because your population growth right now, is you are growing by 4%. That is your population growth. That means to say, you will double your population, your present population, in just 17 years. And that's how fast you are growing. So you are growing fast. One of the slowest growing population in Asia is Japan. They don't grow anymore.
Yeah.
They actually are 0.2% in population growth. Yours is 4%, meaning to say you will double. This is your doubling time. So for example, your present population now is 10 million. Plus 17 years, your population will become 20 million after 17 years because of your very high population growth rate. So then you will have more problems Once the population is increased, then you will have more problems. Right. The next lecture would be rural development already. We have about 45 minutes to discuss that. Okay. So, in other words, the lecture today is for 2.5 hours, and we'll have another 2.5 hours tomorrow. That is a total of 5 hours, right? So now we will be finishing at 11:30 your time,
Okay.
and 10:30 in my time. So do you have questions, your own questions first, about those three areas, rural, development, and Asia? Those are the three topics I have discussed so far. What is rural, what is development, and what is the Asian region? Do you have questions?
Okay.
Yeah, as you mentioned, as you mentioned that the African population is growing at a rate of 4%. So by the year 2050, we expect the population to maybe double. Now, as somebody who is in the field of rural development and sociology, what suggestion can you give? What suggestion can you give for us, we African, in order to control the rate, as because we know the resources is dwindling. With the current situation of Africa is like around maybe 1 point something billion. It has not reached 2 billion yet. But if the population is growing at that rate and it reaches a certain level, because we are technologically we are behind, we are unable to feed the current population, which is not up to like Asia, because the Asian population is a 4.5 billion, and because ASEAN as a technology, they are able to feed their population, and Africa is considered as a reserve. Africa is considered as a reserve, and Southeast Asia and some Latin American countries, because of most of the lands are not yet utilized. But as the population grow like that, how will it be now as a reserve? Because population is doubling at a rate which is beyond control, and as the population grows, there will be competition for the limited resources, where it will result into either conflict and other things, because we know it is not only the population now which is affecting the world. There is also what we call the climatic change. Because as the climatic change of recently, there is what we call a heat wave which ran across Asia and some part of Europe currently. Like today in Spain and Portugal, the temperature is to go around above 50 centigrade, which is beyond what for human what. As a result of that, if the population is like that, what will be the solution people need to do?
Yeah. And from Kamiyama, as a related question, there is one theory which can be observed by historically, which is called population transformation. So, there are several conditions or several options, such as for decreasing the population growth, and change the population growth to population decrease by several options, like providing a good opportunity for women to get more better income, and providing the health insurance, so that the family doesn't need so many kids. And as a third option, provide changing some the social system by establishing the pension system. There might be some other options there. So my question is, population transformation theory. It might not precise terminology, but there is such a hope or some kind of evidence-based hypothesis or theory. There is. So. Considering such situation, you can provide us some better, better future condition, even in coming 20 years or 30 years. Thank you.
Let us review what Gaban has given us. He said that he was talking that they will double in 2050. No, you will double in 2035. That's 17 years. You will double your population. And he said that there will be more food and water insecurities, not only because of corruption, but because of climate change. Now, Professor Kamayama said that one solution is for you to transform your population these are the points that he has given us. Provide women more opportunities outside the home so they can work and become economic productive. That's good. Because right now, the only reason why you are producing a lot is that because there is less, because women have less roles for women. The only thing that they do is to reproduce and take care of their children. But if they have more roles by working outside, then they will have more roles. And this is not the only reason why they are there. So in other words, their role is not only to reproduce and take care of children. They should have more roles. And one of the suggestions of Professor Kamayama is that the country should provide work opportunities for women so that they have more roles. And when they have more roles, then they can contribute, not the income. Then they will be what they call, this is the source of empowerment. Their source of women empowerment. Do you agree with that? And once you empower the women, you also have to educate. It should be both. It takes two to tango. In other words, it takes man and a woman to have a baby. But what you need is you also have to educate the men. Educate the men too. In order to understand and eliminate male
I have already educated my wife.
One of the things that the government, one of the principles to eliminate population, to lessen population, is in economic growth.
Communism.
Once the economy is growing, it can act as a natural contraceptive. Because there is more opportunities for them. That means, say, once you are rich, then the population will go down. That is one theory.
Yeah.
But very hard for you to do economic growth because of corruption. So that's why the population keep on growing. Yes, go ahead.
like in Africa, people generalize the population growth to be at 4%, but in some region, because the high growing rate is mostly in the cattle community, the pastoralists, and the Muslim, because they like marrying like more than one man can marry more than four. Because if you see a country which is mostly a Christian country, the population is not at that rate growing. Because currently the highly growing population is, they say Nigeria will double in some years to come. Like in Nigeria, the highly populated growing is in the northern part, which is mostly dominated by the Muslim. And the Muslim have an ideology in some years to come, like they want to dominate the worldly population, and they wanted to be highly populated in the world so that they would control the world. That is the one principle in the Muslim they have in their mind. And the cattle, the pastoralists, because for them, they produce, they don't value the world. The children are just produce many so that they can run after the animals. But the Christian or other world community who are a bit able to what, because the more you produce, you cannot feed them all, and with the level of education, everything is now expensive. People in some places, the population growth is dwindling down, but it's still in some part where level of education is very low. People are producing, they don't know, they don't value what, because they produce, even if that one died, they just got, but the other population who are a bit somehow gain some education, and others who are exposed to the world, now they know the value of having a what they call a nuclear family or a small family, where you are able to support them in terms of health, education, and able to feed them. These are the other things which is affecting difference between in Africa. People, but the general people generalize Africa to be growing fast, but it's not all. Mostly maybe Muslim and the pastoralists. These are the people who are producing highly. They are very growing at high rate.
What do you think of this? This is the summary of what you've been telling us. Because there is no education, they cannot find work, no employment. And when there is no employment, more people will come because they are always at home. That's their only role, to reproduce and to have children. And there will be a growing poverty. And that is the reason why population can be a cause to poverty, can be a cause to poverty in developed countries. In a Muslim country, they are pro-children because what they want is that if there are more people, there are more people that will work in the pasture. That is why they are not for controlling the number of their children, because they believe that if you have more children, more people to work in the pasture, and that is good, right? But if you have more children, you cannot provide them with good education. And when they grow up, they will not be able to work well. So they will be producing more children, and then that means a growing poverty. That is the sequence. Whereas, as you said, in your country, Christians have low number, have less children. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Less children. Whereas Muslims have more children. Is Sudan predominantly a Muslim country?
The northern part of Sudan, the North Sudan is a predominantly Muslim, but the south is Christian, is a majority. Muslim are there, but they live side by side, because in the Muslim, one can marry more than 3 wives. They are allowed to marry, but in Christian, in traditional African tradition, people do marry many those days. But we did technology, the changing of what and the coming of the AIDS, because previously there was no AIDS, things like AIDS, which kill a lot of people. So everybody is now fearing need to stick to one, so that you're able to control your health. And the pastoral community, for them, they marry also, they behave the same like the Muslim, they marry many. Like I didn't witness, but what I was told the story by the local storyteller, in the cattle keeping community, a man, because the woman stay there, you come and spare what there, spare down. If today there is spare there, it is so there's a man there. Because the brother can come and enter in that world. Today, then you, the other brother, cannot come move to the other wife because maybe you have 2 or 3. Your brother can come and stay with the wife. So it is like the wife is a communal property. That's what I had. But I did not witness. That's what I was.
Is that what you're saying?
In a pastoralist community, because like if one man can marry more than 5 or what, so the other brother, if today the man is not in the other house, the other brother can come and put his spear.
Wife is a communal property?
Like the woman.
Wife can have many husbands?
Yes, the brothers, because people, one can have the other brother, they can share. The woman. Sometimes that's what I was told in the pastoralist community. Those the cattle keepers, they do. That's why they are producing a lot.
So, in other words, wife is a communal property. They can have many husbands.
They can have many, but not outside. It's within the clan. Like because, like let me say, me, I have my father. The father maybe has around 3 brothers. So if me, I marry more than 5 wives. Today, if I'm not there, then my brother can come and enter in the other one. I think the wife become a family. What people do. That's what I mean in the pastoralist community.
Then that can also be a problem.
Yes.
All right, let's have a little break. I'll just go to the bathroom.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and then we will continue with this. All right, bathroom break.
Okay.
Rural development and Asia. Now let's talk about rural development in general. Okay, so what is rural development as a concept? Well, it connotes overall development of rural areas with the view to improve the quality of life of rural people. So when we say improve the quality of rural life people, is that no one will be deprived of food. They have their own houses. They have opportunity to get educated. All right, and they have also what they call that's the meaning of they have a roof over their head, meaning they have a house, they have food on the table, and they have enough clothing. So quality of rural life means to say that they're able to satisfy most of their basic needs. And what are these basic needs? Food, clothing, and shelter. Okay? So, what do you want to improve? All this one, to have a quality of life. So you ask your own self, do I have that? Can I satisfy my basic needs? You can only go to that after satisfying their basic needs. Then you can go into other needs. So what are these? Economic, psychological needs, the need to belong, and so forth and so on. But first of all, you have to have food, clothing, and shelter. So what is the problem in the rural areas? If you're going to use the income criterion I'm just talking about the income criterion of what is rural development. The people in the rural areas are usually small-scale farmers. In your case, pastoral farmers, right? They are pastoral farmers. They don't own the land. In your country, they don't own their animals that they are pasturing, right? That's how you are saying. So what happened is that there is a lot of rural poverty. And to solve rural poverty, you mentioned before, there's a need for education, to educate them. They need to be health. They have to have good health, meaning free from ordinary illness, or plague or epidemics. And nutrition. And you like this, nutrition. It is just providing them food. It is providing them with nourishment so they will become healthy. So these are the common characteristics of poor people: low education, poor health, malnourished. So we're gonna change this one this time. They have low or no education. And then this time they have poor health. And then in this one, they are usually malnourished. Okay, so that is a characteristic of poor people in the rural areas. No education, they have poor health because they don't have enough food. They don't have enough clothing to shield them from the shelter, and then therefore they become malnourished. Huh? Right, so those are the three things that we wanted. So what do we do? First, let us have an understanding of a rural development. It is a discipline. Actually, it's multidisciplinary in nature that intersect agriculture, social, behavioral, and management of sciences. So when we talk about rural development, it is not just a subject of sociology. It is not just a subject of the agricultural economists. It is not just a subject of business managers, but it is everything. To have rural development, you have to get the expertise of an agriculturist, an agricultural economist, a social behavior like myself, or management of sciences. So in short, rural development is a process that aims at improving the standard of living of the people in the rural areas. So when we talk about standard of living, food on the table, clothing on their back, roof on their head. So you have food on the table, clothing on their back, and roof on their head, which is house. No? Enough clothing, meaning, and then food. No one will go hungry. That is the meaning of living in the rural areas. Rural development is also an ideology and a practice. It means to say that rural development is a plan changed by public agency based outside the rural areas. In other words, the innovations or the change should not only come from within the people living in the rural areas, but it should be introduced from the government, like the Sudan government. They should really make an effort to introduce change. So the national government is very important. Do you have international organizations that come to Sudan who help us provide financial?
Yeah, because like currently our people are just living, they stay because of the international organization. Because most of them, either they are in the IDPs camp or protection of civilian side, others in the refugees camp. So they depend on the international organization. So it is because of the international organization that's why they are able to put something on the, or at least little, being provided by the donors for them for feeding.
So they give them relief goods. Is that correct?
Yes.
Relief.
Yeah, they provide for
goods
them relief.
or provide them food. No.
Yeah, provide.
What
them.
are example of this? What are some example of international organizations?
We have
like, IDPs are the internally displaced people, right?
Yes, we have like the
you have
International Rescue Committee.
IDPs, internally displaced people.
Yes, the organization are like International Rescue Committee.
Right. Okay. What are some example of international who provide relief goods or food?
We have the World Food Program, WFP.
UNID.
No,
they have it?
WFP, World Food Program of UN.
AID?
AID, they are the many donors.
World Vision, do you have that?
Yes.
Or World Food, do you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing.
Food organizations,
FAO.
UNAID. And of course, what you are now enjoying is the JICA.
Yes, JICA is part of. Also, JICA is there.
JICA. Is it JICA?
Yeah.
It's JICA?
No.
And that's an international organization, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an international. It's a corporation.
I cannot hear you.
What is happening?
Okay, there.
JICA is the international corporation, and we have like a WFP, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, International Rescue Committee, World Vision, Action Against Hunger, ACF.
Oh, so many.
Very many. Yeah, we have many of them.
Yeah, so how do the government work with them? Do they cooperate with them? Or do they prevent them from coming to your country? Or do they allow them to come to your country?
They allow them to come, but sometimes because they restrict the movement, like they don't allow sometimes them to move to the rebel control area. Like sometimes they use, people are using food as a weapon, like to people to submit to themselves. So they don't allow the international organization to deliver food aids to some of the displaced people who are staying in the rebel control areas. So it is really sometimes they use the food as a weapon.
So in other words, in rural areas who are another rebel people are not given food. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct
because
the government is restricting the movement of the international organization who are the ones supplying the food, because it is not the food being delivered to the rebel, but the displaced civilians. Because some civilians feel safe if they stay to the side of the rebels. Because sometimes the government, people believe government are the ones sometimes killing them, so they don't feel safe to stay with the government side. Better they stay in the rebel control area, they feel safer. So now, because we know the government, all the international organizations come through the government, and the embassies and what through are mostly located in the city. So they restrict the movement. In such way situation now, like WP, they are using what they call airdrop to deliver some of the food to some of those remote areas, and it is very expensive because airdrop is expensive. If they have to use a truck, sometimes it will be better. Where the money spent on the air transport can be used to buy more food.
So plant change, as I mean to say, is that people from the government and people from are free to go anywhere else. It's not this in the case of Sudan, right? That seems to be, that's not how it goes. Okay, let's look at this one. Rural development as a concept. It connotes development of rural areas to, I guess, to improve the quality of life of rural people. I think I have given that. But rural development is also a phenomenon. Why? Because it is an interaction of various the physical, technological, economic, and social-cultural factors. Physical means to say it's a pastoral community. What technology are you using? What is the economy? And what are the social-cultural? What's the belief about taking care of animals? What's the belief of owning an animals? What are the benefits of having owned animals? Is it owned by a clan or by kin or so forth and so on? That is what we meant by social-cultural factors. Now, when we talk about it as a strategy, rural development can be understood as the unfolding of capitalism in rural areas, and as that package of policy and project intervention that aim. Tomorrow we'll be talking about all these projects that have been introduced in the rural areas to enhance development. But today, the strategy that is being used is that there are some project interventions usually given by international organizations. What do? They wanted to foster socio-economic change and human improvement in rural areas. We wanted to foster economic change and human improvement in the areas. And tomorrow we'll be talking more about this. What are the different case studies, including the one on the small water impound management, small irrigation farm that was done in the Philippines, the Global Alliance for Food that you suggested that I'm gonna read. And then when we talk about socio-cultural, we are also talking about the trust, we are going to talk about equality and so forth. Now, some writing on rural development addresses general issues of agrarian change or peasant economy and rural politics. So that is some of the things that are being shown regarding rural development, agrarian change, peasant economy, and rural politics. But other writings are more of like in focus. They addresses project impacts on rural people and environment, and asking how these impacts might be improved and enhanced. I think in the first one, this is where your problem is. The issues on peasant economy is one of your issues, and then there's still rural politics. That is one of your issues. The way I gathered from you, you still have peasant economy, and you still have a lot of rural politics, meaning to say the economy is still controlled by few, controlled by the few. And you still live in a peasant economy, not capitalist. So how do we introduce development in such characteristics? So one of the things that had been mentioned here is when we talk about rural development, it is a process. When we say process, it is not a one-shot deal. It has a beginning, and it is and it's an ongoing thing. What do? You utilize both the natural and human resources. That's one. You utilize the technologies. You utilize infrastructure facilities, institutions, and government policies and programs so that you can encourage and speed up economic growth in the rural areas, with the end in view of providing jobs, and again, to provide quality of rural life towards self-sustenance. That is from way back in 1986. Probably Professor Kamiyama has a lot more to say about rural development, but there are several things that I wanted to emphasize to you today is that when we talk about rural development, it is actually making use of what is existing in that area. That is the natural resources. Natural means to say you have timber, you have oil. I think that's your natural resources. The human resources are the people. The human resources are the people. And when we talk about the people is, what kind of people do you have? Are they all very young? Are they uneducated? Are they living in dark poverty? Are they always sickly? Then that is the human resources that you have. What kind of technologies do you use? You say it's still very low standard farm tools. That's your technology. Whether you use a piece of wood, that is a technology, but very low tech. No machinery, that's low tech. What are the infrastructural facilities that have been existing in your community? Do they have do you have dryers? Do you have harvesters? Nothing on that. Do you have enough pastoral field to scatter your animals? What about the institutions? When we talk about institutions, there are 5 important institutions. One is your family and clan. Second institution is schools. The third institution is the government. The fourth institution is the business and economy. The fifth institution is business. Those are the 5 institutions. What's going on in all these 5? Family, religion, economics, government, and the school. What's going on with all these 5 institutions, right? What are some of the government policies that have been introduced? Government policies and programs. Maybe you could tell us more about this later on. What are these policies that can help provide jobs and improve the quality of rural life in the rural areas? One policy that I can cite right now about is, in my country, they have introduced organic farming because they said that organic farming is one way to restore back the fertility of the soil, right? So that you don't anymore use inorganic chemicals and for fertilizers and for pesticides. That's a government policy. What are the programs that we have? One of the programs that we have in the rural areas is what they call the subsidizing the poor. We select all the poorest family in the rural areas, and then the government gives them money or allotment so that the children can go to school. We have a program like that, no? Right, so these are the programs. Why do we have those policies and programs? So that we can speed up economic growth and provide jobs. What do we do in order to provide jobs in the rural areas? One of the infrastructure that was built is building roads and highways. We call them road to market, farm to road market, meaning to say, if this is the farm, there should be roads in order to bring their goods to the market. So what infrastructure was built? Building roads, so that the people, the farmers can bring their produce to the market and sell it themselves, not anymore to the middle person. What is the reason for that? to provide jobs and improve the quality of rural life. So that's one infrastructure. They call it farm to road market. No? Farm, road from farm to market. A road, building roads from the farm to the market. What else was done? They build, they ask a family, to help and cooperate, to participate in all the government programs and policies, all in the name of improving the quality of rural life. So what do we do now? So what are the necessary ingredients to achieve development in the rural areas? Now I'm asking you. Now, I have given you several things. One is infrastructure. Infrastructure, which is actually roads from farm to the market. Usually farms are very, very far, and they are very, very far from the market area. So what was done is for them to build infrastructure, and one infrastructure is roads and also bridges. Because we are an island, we have to have bridges and roads were built from the farm to the market. Okay, that's one ingredient. To connect the rural to the urban, and to help the goods from the rural to bring to the urban areas. Right. The other infrastructure is the institutions. Institutions, as I mentioned, are the following: family, the government, that's and then school, and then religion, or what we call church. The church is not as a religion. The church is an institution. And then we have, of course, the business. And then we have mass media, and now the social media. Who have access to this? That is part of rural life, rural building good institutions. And I did mention also, as I mentioned earlier, what are the other ingredients? Okay. It should also mean there should always be policies and programs. Oh, your turn. What else is lacking here? In order to achieve development in the rural areas. What do you think?
I say education is to change the mindset, because if the rural community are able to change the cultural behavior, maybe because culturally they believe their way of life may be the best, but as their education is produced, they can now change and move with the other people in the world. Because as the world is changing, because sometimes the other cultural beliefs which are a bit backward, like in some community, pastoral community, they do the women, the female genital one, they still do the female genital circumcision of the female. They do the female genital. I just forget what they still do such that kind of thing. So if they are able to change, then to me, there can be at least the community can now come together and do things for the development. And also, the gender issue need to be included because in African setting, men they want to dominate everything, but women also need to be included because gender, there should be equality among the community. Everything they can do jointly for the benefit of the community.
So what culture in your country that deters development? It is a barrier to development. What is a particular culture in Africa that is a deterrent for development?
Like in sometimes issue of early marriages, giving away the young girls. This is one of the factors. These are some of the factors which are affecting us because people they see their daughters as like source of income because they give the children early into the marriage.
Right. Dam is it is supposed to be a good source of electricity, right? Electricity. And so what happened here is that the people do not want to use it for a source of electricity, hydroelectric power, the dam. So it's a very good dam, but it is a source for what we call hydroelectric power. Right? Why is it that the people do not like to use it? It's mainly because the dam, the people don't want to touch it, to want to use it for power, for generating electricity, because they believe, this is a culture, they believe that the dam is sacred and home of their ancestors. So if they're gonna touch it, it will bring bad. That is an example of a deterrent. How culture is a deterrent for development. So now the people there do not have yet electricity because the source where they can get an electricity from the water cannot be because the people are protesting. No, don't touch that because that is sacred. The dam is sacred and home of their ancestors. It will bring bad luck if you do that. So that is an example of a deterrent. You give your own example. Do you have your own example?
No. I don't have because I have not seen such culture in my country. People were using it in some of the sample as what is culture thing, but I have not seen. So I don't have a good example.
So how can we prevent development? This is providing them electricity could be a development, but mainly because they don't want that down to be tots, then they don't get development. That is a very good example. Another example is use of, and that is an institution, that's cultural institution. Another example is the use of family planning methods. No? In my country, we don't use it. So what happened is that the population keep on growing. Why don't we not use it? Because our religious institution, one institution, which is religion or the church, do not allow us to use family planning methods, only natural methods. So what happened is that the Philippines is one of the fastest growing population in Asia. So that is a deterrent to development. That is a deterrent. Those are some of the examples that we can give you regarding why culture sometimes can prevent us from developing. And why some institutions, in your case, I think it's the politics, it's the corruption in the government, that's why you are not developing. In our case, we have good schools. Another one is perhaps good schools, low quality education can be also a deterrent to education. Then multiple families can also be a deterrent to development. Institutions like the church, who doesn't allow for any other family planning method except natural, is also a deterrent. When mass media is so controlled by the government, then that is also a deterrent. There is no free press, meaning people are not allowed to write whatever they wanted to write. Like, for example, the corruption in the government. Then that is also a deterrent to development. That is also a barrier to development. No? So that is mass media. What about social media? Do we have it? Social media like Facebook, use of Twitter, use of this, that is a social media. It can foster development, but it can also not foster development. Okay.
Yeah, we have them, but still it is censored, because sometimes there's some security agents, because like if something wrong, you post on the Facebook or the Twitter or YouTube, or they will still follow you. They are tracing, sometimes they will be, because most of the people are using the cell phone or internet from the telecom providers. We don't have the wireless, or so they may either follow you and either get you sometimes. Sometimes some people lose their life, they can assassinate, because government agents, some of them, they do evils, they do assassinate, because you expose some of the weakness in there. They don't want you people to mention how they are wrongdoing. Because social media is like now a platform for mostly the youth who are, because the younger generation who are educated, able to dig some of the issue out and post to, so that the others can also see. But as a result, it has created sometimes problem.
Yeah. So you see now how these institutions, family, government, school, and church, mass media, and social media, can help or promote development, and they can also at the same time deter development. Okay? Yeah. Right. So that's how we're gonna end the session today. I hope you learned something, right? Can you give me your feedback right now so that we can improve the one for tomorrow? Okay. Do you have any feedback? Because that is 2.5 hours right now. Mm-hmm. Your attention is only that much. You cannot have a long period of time, so that we should cut it now so that you'll be more attentive, for tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll start again at the same time, 9 o'clock at your time, and ends at 11:30. All right. And we will be talking about illustrative cases of rural development projects that are being done in the world to promote rural development. Okay. Do you have feedback? Did you learn something from this lecture or from this session?
Yeah, the lecture was so interesting because I was able to get some blessing maybe before I didn't know, but because you were able to elaborate some of the point, and as we do interact, like it's a two-way, we interact, we're able to come and get some, I'm able to learn a lot from you, and with the little also I gave you, so you got some little from me. I feel it is giving me hope for what is my future, because in sub-Saharan Africa, most of the project need to be done is in the rural area, because we need to uplift the standard of living for the rural sector, and I hope to work in the rural area, because when you work in the field, you learn a lot. Sometimes through the practical, you get a lot of, you learn while you work with the practical. But if you concentrate in the urban center, you move from home, the office, you will not learn. Just you only sit down. But if you work in the field, you interact with the local, you will be able to get more and learn from them. That's what I'm looking forward. And that's what I will be, at least I want to do. Most of my life I want to concentrate and work with the rural people, that I'll also be able to change their life, maybe to a certain level.
That's what you're saying, right? Go to the people, learn from them, not just stay in the office, because they have a lot to teach us. They will tell us about their concerns, they will tell about their problems, they will learn about their issues. In other words, when you go back to your country, do not just stay in the office and just do the planning right there, but go back to the people, ask them, and we call them, tomorrow we'll talk about this, participate in their decision making. Meaning to say, what do they need? Ask them. And then ask them again, this is what you need. How do we think you can solve it? You help. It is not coming from you, but it's also coming from them. So they call it participatory. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So in other words, you are not there to teach them, but you're telling them, you have your own knowledge. You know what's going on in your area. Tell me what we do not have, and how can we solve those what you cannot have. And that means it is coming from them, and let's help them do the planning. Because if it's coming from them, then they will be able to be more motivated to do it. Rather than just teaching them. They usually they don't understand. In fact, we do not understand their situation. Ask them and make them aware. And perhaps if they are not aware, oh, this is what's going on. Correct me if it is correct or not. And perhaps that is how it should be done. So people participation is part of the things that I'm going to discuss for tomorrow. Okay. I'd have a good day.
You have something to say?
Have a good day, and hopefully.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Nelson. Please have a good weekend as well.
We'll see me tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yes, we are looking forward. Thank you.
Fine, Professor Tamayama.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied with the lecture?
Yes, of course. But do me a favor, just one point. Do we have we've got a quite nice a kind of framework based on mainly sociology, and considering the primary mission for Abe initiative. So JICA has been expecting Taban-san to be a nice businessman, and Taban-san also are looking forward to be a good manager, not an administrator in the public sector. So if you can, how we cannot solve some or not change the not heading the social change, but how and what kind of options. Well, how can we take the aspect of mostly manager? It might be possible.
You see, I'm a sociologist, so I'm not a manager, right?
Yeah, sure.
Some tips to be a good manager.
Yes.
And a businessman. That is the economic.
No,
manager.
I'm not saying please delete businessman, but a good manager. What might be the task and the mission to work as a good manager in these topics?
Well, I think one of the things that in his situation right now,
yes,
right, you have to understand everything.
Yeah.
I think what is a good manager in a developing country?
In developing
what kind of manager? Food manager or what? There's several managers in a developing country.
Yes.
With
Instead of discussing some politics,
pensions.
Politician cannot sometimes cannot survive and enjoy a long life. So
What
instead,
kind of manager do you want? Food manager, forester manager,
What kind of manager?
agricultural manager.
not really specified. But,
How can you become a manager in a developing country with political tensions and conflict and with lots of corruptions? Okay, so how can you do it? What's the framework for doing that? I don't know. What I'm giving him is for him to understand his situation right now. Just like what we're doing, participatory decision making, how then he can use all this knowledge that we have shared to him this morning to come up with his own way of having which is not from the book, because we cannot give it, because we don't know the situation in his own country. What I'm telling him is that now that given what is rural, what is development, how can we promote development? How can we change the standard of living in the rural areas given all this situation? So that is how can he manage and improve the quality of life in the rural areas, given all these barriers, particularly tensions and conflict in school.
Yeah,
That's
just
what
in
I'm
case.
trying to-
Just in case.
That's what I'm trying to tell him.
Yes.
You know. So he's the one who's going to come up with a framework, having a situation like that. The answer for him is for him to be able to address all of these questions. How does he address corruption? How does he address
Maybe too much
conflict
pressure.
or food equality, for distribution or for equal distribution? So if he can address that, it means to say that he could become a manager.
Yeah. It's a primary target, primary object.
That is what he will going to do, address conflict for equal distribution of food and benefits to the population in Sudan.
Sorry, South Sudan, please.
For me, this is what makes, if we can come up with a good way of addressing these two problems that he mentioned earlier to us, then he can become a good manager.
Yeah.
Alright. So how can he become a good manager when you have this and this? When the business and when the government do not want people to have free enterprise, no free enterprise, because the government wants to control everything. So free enterprise means means producing good managers. But right now, these are still the barriers that he has to address. Right now, these are the barriers. For me, these are the barriers that can disrupt his goal to be a manager. When the government in itself doesn't even allow free enterprise, that's a problem. So I cannot give that to him because he has to come up, because he knows the cultural, in addressing this, he has to understand how it works, how the politics work, the family in terms of the ties, the family ties in this country, and also education, schooling in their country. We can help to address that corruption by understanding all those institutions. How can you become a good manager if you don't even have roads, if you don't even have good schools, if you don't have health facilities?
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just put some kind of pressure to consider his daily consideration and heading to be a good manager. So, thank you very much. So, if you come up with some good ideas or some address something, then
I don't know. Because they do not want to give food to the rebels. Even if international communities are coming, they do not want the rebels to have food.
Yes.
So how can that be? How can that be? How can that be done?
Yeah.
So they are using food as a weapon so that the rebels will surrender and be part of the government. Is that what I understand from Raman? Is that correct? In other words, food is a weapon, meaning I will not feed you so that you can come back and surrender. When you surrender and be aligned with the government, then we'll give you food.
Okay, so please close. Yeah.
That is what he meant when he said food as a weapon.
Thank you.
So how can you manage that? Maybe one of the things that you can do is, as he said, change the mindset that only the people in the lower, but most of the people on top, the people who are governing the country needs to be changed.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what our suggestion is of help. It will be of a great help to me. Thank you very much for the suggestion. Looking forward for getting more from you.
Yeah, tomorrow, please.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.